Good afternoon, and welcome to Never Not Here. My name is Richard Miller, and as always, I'm glad to be with you. And we do a lot of talking, and maybe we're pretentious. Maybe we think we have something to say, and maybe we talk to people that have expectations that they have something to share. And I hope that's not too irritating. Anything can happen, right? And I'm only looking at it from my little corner of the world, and so I'm thinking everything's great. And I know some of you guys are showing up now and again, so something must be working for you. But one of the most satisfying series that we have and that we've been talking is what we call open mic. And open mic means basically without any pretension and without any expectations. And basically we're modeling, talking to you and talking among you and just being me, just being us, just being who we are without anything, with any enhancements, no enhancements. So we're not waiting for tomorrow. We're not fixing anything up. We're not preparing anything. We're not building any scenario. We just are. And then we appear the way we are. So what could be better than that? So then when John Komperda said he'd like to talk, I said, how great. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks for having me, Richard. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for just following what we've been doing. I know you've even been in the studio before.
Yeah, I've seen a few songs with Scott and Suzanne Foxton, Scott Kiloby, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a year ago, so we get around.
Sure.
And a year later, we're still connected, so it must not be all that bad. So then there's an interest to follow this line of reasoning, this line of thought, this line of experience. Just see what are other people saying, and what does it all add up to in my life? I don't know.
Yeah. It seems like once you start, you can't stop either, as much as you'd like to. Sometimes that's been my experience. I often wonder why I even got into this whole seeking thing, but
is it any different really than just living, or is it just a refinement on regular living? Or I mean, it's kind of like a narrowing, or
is it any different? And I think that's the paradox, is no, that it isn't. You come full circle and you end up right where you first started, and that's the paradox. And and you start to wonder what the fuss was about all this stuff in the first place. I like to think enlightenment, awakening, it's the most overrated thing in the entire world, 'cause it's so ordinary. It's who you are.
I think that's cool, because if we could just realize, well, what was the fuss all about? Maybe we can give that should be the main message, really.
Sure, yeah. And I think a lot of times people are looking for something big. As a seeker, the mind is looking for big experiences, big epiphanies. Sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't, but they're looking for something big. The mind wants something. And
well,
awakening
it feels
is
like
nothing.
life is enhanced when we're real clear, right? And then when we're kind of like groggy and just like, can't get through day, and people are down on us here, left and right, the school teacher or the classmates, or whenever it started to happen, and saying, hey, you're kind of loopy, and it's loopy Richard. You must
Some
be
things
less
never
than me,
change.
And kids are kind of like sometimes cruel to each other, so
Sure.
you can figure.
Yeah, and in terms of enhancement, I would say that just having that stable ground of knowing who you are in truth enhances one's life. You can fall back into that. You can remind yourself there's that recognition. And I think that gives you peace and clarity to enjoy, to experience. The fog in some sense has lifted and you can see more clearly.
Sometimes, I mean, Yeah, so then we want that to happen, okay? We want that clarity, and we don't really want that fog.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes we have to say, well, just be with the fog.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
accept that too. I mean, I was just thinking of asking, what's it like for the younger people that you know and for the people that you know that are your age? I mean, I would say that compared to when I was younger, people accept each other more.
Yeah, these days I think so. I think they're much more open-minded, open-hearted. I don't think they see a lot of the conceptual barriers aren't as dense as they once were. So I think there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah, it seems like that when I was young, we were looking for any reason at all to ostracize somebody, any reason at all to blame somebody or to make less of them or make fun of them.
Sure.
Or there was no ground that was sacred. I mean, if anyone was handicapped, then that was really a perfect target.
Yeah, definitely. I think you make a good point. I agree. In that aspect, I think socially, we've seen a lot of progress in that realm. So,
how did that work? Because a lot of times we emulate our parents and emulate our society, and we copy them. But somehow, I don't think our parents really saw the light the way we and our children are.
So
how's it working? Why does that happen?
Why did that happen?
The acceptance, that we're accepting. Society is more accepting.
Yeah, perhaps it was the next frontier, and progression was social progression, and I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? You have any ideas? It's definitely true. It's something I've noticed. You notice.
Well, I notice it in myself, and maybe that's how I notice it in others, because maybe before I was noticing it in myself, I didn't notice it in others. In other words, in a way, lots of times people do say that you're a reflection of what's around you, or the world's a reflection of you, either one, either way you look at it, And so then maybe that's just me that's accepting more, and then therefore I see it more.
Sure, and you're projecting out.
I project that, just the way I projected the crankiness before.
Sure. And maybe same is true for me, and everything's exactly as it was. But no, yeah, I agree. About the projection thing too. Change the world you see, and the world you see will change, right? So, or actually, it's a Gandhi quote. It was I misquoted him. It was change the way you think about the world, and the world you think about will change. And everything's a direct projection of our inner experience, is what it comes down to. So I think it's probably true in both cases.
We could just say that, but I mean, it's even logical because, if it's not in your inner experience, you might not even come on the radar. You might not even recognize it.
You wouldn't even recognize it, absolutely. If you don't have a concept for it, whatever it may be, you wouldn't recognize it in the outside world. There was a story about the Dalai Lama. When he first came to this country, he couldn't understand the concept of envy, why people were envious of other people. And it drove him crazy. What is this envy? Because in Tibet, there wasn't such a thing. They didn't even have a concept for such a thing. It didn't even exist. Someone did good, you were happy for them. There wasn't this idea of envy, So it's very interesting. So that kind of reminded me of what you said. So.
Yeah, that's really great. If somebody did good, you were happy for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But maybe they didn't do that good, though. I don't know. But your children, you would really want your children to be better than you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe. I don't have kids, so maybe it doesn't work. I'm not so sure.
Sure. For being real.
So much is said about being real.
Yeah. And there's a real, and then there's the relative real. The absolute real is just this, just the silence. No duality, no Richard, no John. And then the relative real is,
Mm.
how you see in the marketing ads, and be real to yourself. And so there is a lot. It's a good marketing tool, good marketing campaign. Mm. Which real were you referring to?
I'll just go back and say, like, a lot is said. There's a lot of things that are said about life and about I guess we're in a philosophical type of a teaching, and so then we want to figure out what's really happening. And then we wonder, there's a certain mechanism to a body, to a living being.
Mm-hmm.
And does it help to know something about that mechanism, or somehow just watch it? And then you can see the parts that are creative and the parts that are automatic and the parts that are protective.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose they're all important.
Absolutely, sure. That's...
Especially if they're in balance.
Yeah. And integrated. My experience was that I tried denying those aspects of myself. The body, mind, the personality. And I think to a certain degree it's necessary at first.
Why do you think you wanted to deny that? Let's just go on the personality. Let's just take them one at a time. But you had a feeling that the personality, it wasn't needed, or it was...
Not that it wasn't needed. I feel like there's a fundamental imbalance where we're so identified with the relative, with our conceptual reality, with Richard as Richard exists in concepts, with John as John exists in his own mind. And I think there's just a fundamental imbalance. And at least initially, after you realize who you are, you have an awakening to pure consciousness, whatever you want to call it, you need to go into that for a while. You need to fall into that absolute state to kind of find that balance.
Can you simplify it and just say we're verbal beings? Maybe not solely verbal beings, but a big part of us is a verbal being.
Yeah.
And then, because then we were saying concept, right?
Yeah.
So verbal means
verbal.
It's a verbal model of reality, and that's built out of ideas or out of, verbal model. Verbal model
Sure.
is just taking sounds and meanings, taking pictures, stringing them together, and making a meaning, and
right,
and saying that not really equals life, but that somehow it explains or enhances life, or somehow life lived with that verbal model can be even richer than life lived ignoring that verbal model. I think many of us say something like that, right?
Yeah. I mean, the concepts, the ideas, the verbal model, like you were talking about, yeah, it's very necessary, and it does enrich, enhance life. I do agree with that.
Is it necessary or not? Because, you were saying you were dropping away from it, but, and when
Is
you
the
were dropping
verbal
away
model
from
necessary?
it, when you were dropping away from it, you weren't necessarily saying, I'm only going to set it down for a while. You were just dropping away from it, right?
The verbal model was necessary for the verbal model. I mean, it's kind of the paradox. The world of concepts, the verbal model, is it necessary from the absolute standpoint? No. But it lacks a certain richness. It does. Duality has its place, and I think the ultimate goal is in integrating the two, the absolute and the relative realms, and finding that balance and living from that balance.
Is balance the same as integration?
Yeah. Actually, I would think integration is bringing something into being, kind of a process of fusing the two. I know a lot of people, myself included, when you first awaken to the absolute aspect of oneself, there's almost like there's a thick wall between the absolute and the relative. So that wall has to kind of blur a little bit. And then you see that the absolute and relative are one and the same. But it's a process.
That's good. I mean, to hear, you know, and tell us more about the thick wall. What is that boundary?
I think initially, when you realize your absolute essence, whatever you want to call it, pure consciousness, the self, the capital S, there's such a strong pull there. I guess the contrast between what you were before that experience, whenever it was, and what you were after, there is a seeming contrast. You know, there's this world, and then there's this world. So there is that seeming contrast. At first, at least, was the case for me.
Does it feel richer, or does it feel more flexible, or does it feel more, you know, more opportunity, or I mean,
my overall experience, or
we're contrasting the relative and absolute. And
right.
So we're saying the absolute. Once you see the absolute, or once you've had that taste, there seems like there's a big contrast between.
Right.
And I'm trying to kind of locate that contrast in a way, or sharpen it in focus a little bit, and asking if one of those experiences, or one side of the experience, is more rich, or more flexible, or more there's more opportunity, or it's more balanced, or it's less stressful, or I mean, what is the nature of that boundary?
Sure. As far as the richness, the absolute, that doesn't change, you know. Your experience or relationship with it might. But the relative definitely changes. And it fluctuates too. Once you do integrate, and I like to use the word stabilized. I kind of stole it from other teachings, but it's almost like you got to stabilize in that absolute aspect. You know, a lot of seekers go through the process of have it, lost it, have it, lost it, have it, lost it. And that's exactly what it feels like. In reality, from the absolute standpoint, nothing ever happened. You were already the absolute to begin with, but from a relative standpoint, there is there. So yeah, so you almost create more of a boundary when you first awaken, because there is that dichotomy. There's this perfect peace that's always there, who you are, and then there's this seemingly neurotic, bipolar, schizophrenic world that you exist in as a body-mind. So I think initially, awakening, at least for me, the boundary became thicker.
So in other words, that perfect peace seems to be located somewhere, in a way, right? Because
sure.
Back out in the world, it's not.
Sure.
So then it's some kind of a cocoon or something at first, right?
Yes.
It's some kind of a protected zone, or maybe it comes with or is there a belief in protection? Because like a lot of times we seek quiet, and we seek the Sangha, or, you know, people that are thinking in a like way. We're seeking a teacher who's setting up an environment. Maybe there's an ashram or something like that. So then in that way, it is kind of like a cocoon, or like a padded cell, you know, like a...
Sure.
Like
And you know, a lot of satsang teachers say that's not needed. And I guess it depends on the individual. But that cocoon atmosphere you talk about, the ashram, I think that is to bring that balance. Because we are so fundamentally imbalanced in the relative. You know, our existence has been solely in the relative our entire lives. That in order to bring balance, you need to withdraw a little bit.
So anyhow, I mean, I guess if we want to always be accurate, I think it's important to use words in it in the best way we know how.
Yeah, definitely.
So then we should say that our attention has been so much in the relative.
Yes.
Because we've always been where we are, right?
Absolutely.
We're always totally sourced from source, and whatever. I mean, even if without knowing it, let's say I don't know anything about the distinctions of whether there's the relative and the absolute, or whether there's an eightfold path with 8 ways to be, or
Sure.
I don't have a clue. But I mean, whatever is true for us is true and has been true.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to be changing
Right.
just because we had an eye opener somewhere.
Sure. And like you said, it's all about attention. Where does attention rest? Does it rest in the relative body-mind, or is it resting on the truth that you are, that perfect peace? And attention and also conscious recognition. For the relative to constantly recognize the absolute and know. It's almost like you got to reprogram the relative to accept and integrate this absolute.
See, now we use those words like relative and absolute, kind of to indicate, I mean, that there is a certain amount of indication there, because relative means two objects move with each other, against each other. Okay, positive, negative, positive. But there's always kind of like very relative is a telling word, is what I'm saying. And absolute, just means not relative probably, or I don't know. But really, neither the relative and the absolute really show up in life, like, oh yeah, that's the relative, oh that's the, I mean, you can kind of cognate it or something like that, but I mean, it's not really a thing. It's very much a series of ideas, Whereas, okay, let me give you an example of a
Sure.
thing, I mean, that you could say, that you could really grasp. Okay, like anxiety and contentment.
Sure.
Okay, and those you can feel. As kind of like they show up. And so anxiety could be relative, because you're either this way or that way, or that way or this way, or up or down, or over and up. There's confusion there. And so then if you're trying to go all ways at once, then that kind of feels like you're being pulled apart. And we could call that anxious,
Elaborate on all ways at once.
Well, let's say that you figure that you have to live your life. You have to carry the world on your shoulders, and you don't know exactly how to carry the world on your shoulders. It's a big world and small shoulders. So then there's a million decisions, and they're all wrong, right? Correct? And then the other side would be contentment. Like, there's not much to do. That shows up in your life. Those two things could show up. But when you're speaking about relative and absolute, then those are farther out. You have to kind of really grasp to try to bring them in, and you think you know what they mean, and you don't know what they mean.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And I guess I was kind of, when I use those two terms, it's kind of the Eastern.
It's traditional, right?
Yeah, the absolute being more like samadhi, state of no mind, state of that perfect peace.
Well, we don't even know if there's mind there or not, but it doesn't have very many distinctions. So distinctions might be the content of mind, but mind still is there, or isn't? Who knows? There's no content. Let's just say the state of no content, or limited distinctions. There are some, probably. But content is probably...
There are distinctions to mind?
Well, who knows exactly what mind is? I mean, mind is doing a whole lot of stuff just to keep this organism going, right?
Yeah.
And then who knows what it really is doing? Maybe there's all kinds of reception of electromagnetic radiation from the sun and from the earth and from plants and from our fellow beings. Maybe there's all kinds of things going on, and and we don't really have a grasp on all those things. And we talk about there's words and names like morphic field and stuff like that. And that's probably not electro or not magnetic or not gravitational, or we don't even know what those are as far as our limited science is all about. So then, I mean, I'm saying there's some kind of a mind, maybe, that's operating.
Yeah.
Without using the traditional. If we go to the traditional and say
some
samadhi,
kind of universal okay, so
if we start saying samadhi and no mind, and as if we know what we're talking about.
Right.
And then relative and absolute. Relative makes sense. Absolute is just a real kind of a theory that if there's a relative, then maybe somewhere there's no relative. I don't know. What is it?
The way I see it is that there's the absolute. I could ask, who would you be, Richard, if I wiped out your entire past history, wiped your mind clean? You didn't even have language or vocabulary. Who would you be? Who were you when you were 1 year old? Who would you be if it was all gone?
See, well, we don't know.
But that's
you totally don't know.
That's the absolute aspect of you.
Because we would want to say that I would be nobody and I wouldn't know how to operate these levers and cameras and stuff. But who's to say?
Yeah.
Who's to say that that I need any of that stuff to just make it all work?
Yeah. And that I don't know that you're talking about, or that who knows, that's who you are on the absolute level.
That is the absolute, huh?
Yes. The I don't know is the absolute.
So that I answered perfectly, because you said, who would you be if we wiped out all your relative? And I said, I don't know. And you said, of course, that's who you are.
Yes, you are the I don't know. Yeah.
I lucked into that one.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, when you were one, there was no experience. But yet you existed. But there was no Richard, there was no vocabulary, there was no any cognition of this body, or even a sense of individuality. Even psychology says that sense of individuality isn't created till about two or three. So I mean, but yet you exist. So that's kind of that absolute aspect of you. And it kind of underlies who you are. Then there's this relative that got superimposed on Richard. So it is almost, from an individual's perspective, from a relative perspective, it is like there's an absolute and there's a relative that's superimposed over. Ramana Maharishi used to say, the process of enlightenment, he says, go back the way you came in, retrace the steps. So think about how the story of Richard got created and deconstruct, unlearn. So unlearn the relative, and what will remain is the absolute.
Those are nice words, But is there any unlearning school? I mean, what does it mean, actually, to unlearn the relative?
Right.
And what does it mean, aside from a lobotomy, what does it mean to forget, even?
Mm-hmm. And it's, maybe forgetting isn't the right word, but maybe it's with one's knowledge. It's really seeing and coming back to that absolute aspect through conscious recognition, be it self-inquiry, be it, whatever. There's a couple of different tools that'll get you there. Self-inquiry, I found, is the most useful. But to bring it back to that absolute aspect. And then the relative, it almost learns. You teach the relative. And the relative recognizes the absolute. And the relative learns to exist within this world, knowing it's the absolute. But it's a process. And it's back and forth, up and down, and it's painful as hell sometimes. So.
What do you mean now by the relative learns to recognize the absolute?
Because and I'm going to say in truth, right? This is from, Hindu scriptures, the Vedas. They say that in truth we are Brahman, we are Atman. That I don't know that we talked about earlier. You are that, as Nisargadatta says. But who recognizes that you are that? The relative does. The relative is John. The relative is Richard. The personality, the me, recognizes the absolute. And it recognizes, in truth, that's who it is. That's what everything is. So you got to almost break that addiction of this sense of individuality. There's a sense of individuality we all have, that we're separate, that we're concrete, that our stories are real. And it's got to almost break itself up. And at some point, it has to agree to allow itself to fall back into the absolute. I know I'm getting very heady here.
Similar?
I apologize.
Is it similar? I mean, okay, you're saying that... let's just pause a second here and let's see if we can put this out slowly. That the relative is learned somehow, and there's a conviction that the relative and the separation somehow feels like it's all there is, or that it's more real than any other similarities. And we know we're all made of organic materials and carbon and oxygen, and we know that we share the same oxygen and all these kind of things. But I mean, it doesn't really feel as convincing as my own pain, or my own confusion, or my own sense of inadequacy or lack, compared to how others, to me, seem that they don't have that. They're not sharing that. Mm-hmm. And so then we're saying that the relative learns to recognize the absolute, and then it learns even more that somehow the absolute is its true nature. Mm-hmm. Did we say something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was trying to say.
But does it actually have a similar mechanism of conviction? Or is it another kind of a conviction? In other words, what is this knowing that we're saying that the relative can start to know the absolute?
Yeah.
Is it gradual? And I mean, is it this similar mechanism that, is it experiential, or is it somehow a denial of the old experiences and proving they're made of only tissue paper, and that they're not all that they're trumped up to be?
No, good question. Can you repeat the question part again?
Let's say there's a discontinuity. Because if there's not a discontinuity, then step by step, day by day, things might just be smoothing out, things might just be expanding, things might be getting more and more clear, but really there's not much to talk about, because it's not that different than yesterday. And maybe we think that everybody's like this, and this is just how I've always been. Or other times there's some kind of a jump and a discontinuity, and everything just kind of shifts. There's a shift, right?
Sure.
And say, whoa, what was all that old stuff, Whether it's painful or scary, or, whether it's a rush, or whether, however it is, maybe it's easy. And I just say, oh, of course, look, things are smoother than I thought. I mean, there could be a lot of different emotions and a lot of different reactions that go with it. But when there's some kind of a jump or shift, then it's easier to talk about, right?
It is, yeah. When there's
because then it's more obvious.
A shift
it's more
into the
obvious
absolute.
to you, and it's more obvious to a languaging.
Yeah, and I think that's why sometimes when you hear these stories of these big shifts, these awakenings, these epiphanies, I think they do a lot of people a disservice, because a lot of people look for that, and they miss the obvious nature of it. And I think the actual shifts, the big epiphanies, I think those are probably a rarity. I think most people that awaken, it's more of a gradual process. It's more of kind of an oozing or a slow kind of understanding, rather than this gradual aha. The gradual aha is easier to recognize to the mind, because it's something. The mind is looking for something, and that's why it's not finding it. But if there's a sudden shift, then there's something.
Even if it's not a thing, it can have thingness ascribed to it.
The contrast
of look like it.
The contrast of the relative existence of the neurosis of the mind and thought, and then get thrown into that. Yeah, that shift.
So then you've talked a little bit in this short time about certain traditions, and apparently have read some of Eastern masters and so on, because you describe some things they've said and so on. And so then were you on some kind of a path, or actually studying different modes of thought about, okay, let's just use the term I used before, verbal models. Were you studying different verbal models of a more open life?
Sure, I was. I was all over the radar. I was very neurotically seeking. I tried everything. I was involved in mystical paths. I was involved with Zen for a while. And then kind of just settled into Advaita. And I had good teachers. In physical presence, I've worked with a few individuals, and that really helped. So, but I would say that I most probably resonate with Advaita Vedanta at this point, or any point.
And then some kind of epiphany happened, or some kind of shift happened, right?
Yeah.
So then, because it's easier to talk about a shift, right?
Yeah.
And so then that shift, now this is the really good question, because did that shift really come out of anything you were doing before? Did it take you by surprise, or was it something that was obvious because you were working up to it all along?
It was a little bit of both, actually. And, I was very blessed to have a really good teacher, and it more or less kind of happened in his presence. Whether he induced it, whether it just happened, I don't know. But, I came out of meditation and he pointed it out. It's very important that someone points it out to you. Because when people say, I had this experience of oneness, the oneness isn't the experience. The experience is the personality. The oneness is reality. That's who you are in truth. So you need someone to point to it and tell you that's it. And I think that's why a lot of people miss it. I think a lot of people have actually awakened, but they didn't validate their experience. The mind didn't consciously recognize and what that is in truth. So I think a lot of times people miss that, yeah. But yeah, I was one of the lucky ones where it just happened. He pointed it out to me. And
so then that was like you were explaining an experience, or you said, you were sharing, and you said, I just came out of meditation and this and this.
Yeah, and I had this wonderful...
He says, hey, yeah, well, that was the experience, but look over here.
Yeah.
Or something, somehow he redirected you, or...
Well, I was still in it. I was kind of in that state of no mind, this expansive, very nice feeling state. When he kind of looked at me, he smiled and he says, that's who you are. And immediately there was recognition on the level of the intellect. So the intellect's like, aha, this is what everybody's looking for. So it was like boom, 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 and everything kind of fell into the place. And then you start rereading scriptures and they start making sense, and, everything just kind of falls into place once that initial recognition takes place. But it's very important for that initial recognition to take place. And I was just very blessed to be there.
So then you can see that maybe you'd been there many times, but you weren't recognizing it.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah. And it's so, in Zen, they say sitting Zazen is enlightenment. And, it's just the mind, what does that mean? But it's that simple, it's sitting Zazen is enlightenment. When you're in that state of no mind, that's enlightenment. But there's no recognition. People have been sitting in Zazen for 40 years, and the recognition hasn't happened. Because the intellect never noticed it for what it was. So that's really all it takes.
So now I would say that you and I are speaking out of a stillness.
Yes. Yes.
And sometimes we've been speaking kind of fast, but still that stillness is there.
Yeah.
And so we could say, okay, you recognize it as who you are, and I think it's just a cool stillness, right?
Right, yeah. Yeah, someone might go to a satsang and be like, whoa, man, I'm totally bugged. No, but there's no recognition for that person. Yeah, exactly. That stillness is who you are. You are the silence. Richard is a mask you wear. John is a mask I wear.
So it's not even a silence, because it's just like not even a stillness, because it doesn't deserve a name, really.
The minute you put a name on it, right?
It's just
you negate it.
Just like the absence of anxiety, or more than that, of course, the absence of
everything.
turmoil,
Yeah.
The absence of doubt, maybe. I mean, there's no need to have any doubt.
Yes, and that's huge, the absence of doubt, absolutely. Because what happens to a lot of people when they do maybe even recognize it, oh no, that was too simple. I got to look here. Or I'm going to try that. That was too simple. No way could that be it. No freaking way did I spend 30 years running around like a...
Just for that, right?
Right, for that, exactly.
So anyhow, you're still, you still want your job, of sifting the sands, so you're a good sifter.
Yeah. So what is it?
Seems to me out of this space that, I was just going to say that out of this space, yes is very vibrant. But I'll even stop and not say that. I mean, this space is a yes, in a way, and that no doesn't seem very interesting from this space. Mm-hmm. I'll just say it that way and make no the entity and yes the no thing.
Yeah. Yes is more allowing. Yeah. And even in that space, there's even that tendency to want to cover up that space, you know, on some level, and to even notice that.
It's true, there is an ease in covering it up, you know, and walking away from it.
Because that which wants to cover it up knows that the space, is its demise.
I don't like to say that, you know, because like that which knows that that's its demise doesn't exist, so then it doesn't really know anything, you know.
Yeah.
Those are just talks.
Right.
And it's not really anything. It's better just to leave that one dead, you know, not say anything like that. Yeah. For me.
Yeah, sure. No, it does get.
It's tradition. Heavy. That's the tradition, to say that.
About the demise.
That the mind's demise, and the mind will do anything not to have its demise, and so then it gets busy and all that stuff. But still, the busyness is not because the mind has a personality and the mind is an entity and the mind is protecting itself. The busyness is my underlying belief that I'm incomplete. So I'm still incomplete, even with this space. And that's where the busyness comes from.
Ah. Very good insight. Yeah.
It's me that's grabbing it. There's nobody outside there. There's no mind that's doing anything. There's no body that's doing anything.
But what is a you that's grabbing it too? That's very interesting too. It's some sort of impulse.
Well, it's a tendency. Somehow it's a tendency, and you know, it's like it's a submerged tendency. Let's call it for now.
Yeah.
And see what
that tendency, is. And maybe that's the primary tendency that keeps it all together.
Well, that keeps all what together?
The body mind, the relative story of individuality.
Oh yeah. So in other words, it's said that in tradition that if there was no tendency, then we would transition.
Yeah. Right.
You know, many people say the moment you're enlightened, really, for real, you're out of here.
Yeah. Sure. And yeah. Absolutely.
You know, and then many people even say, like the yogis, they say that all the masters have some kind of foible. They're either gluttonous or they're they have a certain anger or something, and they hold that, and that's what keeps them in the body.
Yes.
They say those kind of things, you know. That's just all.
I heard a story about Ramakrishna with food. That was kind of his thing. When he gave it up, that was it.
Yeah. That was Ramakrishna, right? Yeah. And his wife was upset that he was always looking at, asking what's for dinner.
Yeah. And then he said, enlightened sage.
He said, a few days after I stop asking, I'll be gone. Yeah. And sure enough, it happened that way. Yeah. And then she was shocked.
Yeah. It's a good story. There's another teacher I know who says that his experience is like a spinning top. That there's still momentum, and the momentum has to burn itself out, you know. But that's another way of looking at it too. So
yeah, but I mean, when the top topples over, then he transitions, right?
Right.
Is that the deal?
Yeah.
Yeah. These are all nice stories, but anyhow, I don't need them. I sure don't need them at all, you know.
But that's talking about enlightenment and awakening. I think that's another misconception too. It seems to me that they're different, you know, and there are a few schools of thought.
Well, that's a definition, so define it the way you would rather.
Enlightenment is that recognition, or pardon me, awakening is that recognition that I am that absolute sense, that is your true essence, I think is awakening. And enlightenment is just the dissolution into that. Like the personality kind of dissolves into the absolute. You know, it's like the difference between a fly-by-night Neo-Advaita teacher and Ramana Maharishi. You know, Ramana Maharishi, his personality was totally dissolved into the absolute. You know, rodents were chewing on his limbs, and he was just so disidentified from body-mind.
Not always, you know.
Yeah, not always.
Not always. Just once or twice, you know, a couple of times when he was... Yeah, a
But
couple
it,
times
it seems to me that there's
when he
degrees.
was in a deep trance or something like that.
Yeah.
So then,
It seems to me that there's degrees, though, as far as identification with body, mind, and identification with the universal, the absolute, you know. And I would say that enlightenment is the very end of that paradigm. It's where you're...
So, for so long in identification, I couldn't understand what that meant, and I was just thinking it means that I think that's me. And now I don't say that anymore. I think that identification just means you think that's the way the world works, or you think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
Something is important, and that's your identification with it.
Sure. Yeah, it doesn't have to be personal. It could be outside of you too. But yeah, it's all identification. And if there weren't a you, there wouldn't be any identification. I saw your talk with Ganesh. It was very nice. And then he kind of mentioned that, he's like, why at one you don't have any memories? Because there's no identification of anything. You're just open. Experience goes through you. Once the me gets created, it starts attaching to things internally, body, mind, and then externally too.
Yeah. When you say the me, it sounds like, somehow you slid. But I mean, I think the me is...
And me to define, we're talking about the relative
the me
self.
is inherent in language. Anytime you draw a distinction, there has to be somebody drawing this distinction.
Right.
And so then it's not really an insidious creation.
No.
It's just a part of language.
Yeah. Yeah, and I saw it as one for a long time, and that was part of my process, is accepting it. Like you said, language, thoughts, and any spoken word, any verbalization, mentally or overtly, requires the me. So in essence, it solidifies a sense of me. But that's where that integration comes in, and that's that process, and then seeing that it isn't insidious, And then a lot of traditions push for that, kill the mind, destroy the mind, a lot of Eastern traditions, and one can get caught up in such pursuits too.
Somebody was sharing to me that there was kind of a mini scandal around the Ramana ashram, and people started to retranslate some of the texts and saying they're not translated very well, and there's a lot of misunderstanding in these English versions. And up to the point that the ashram agreed. That, yeah.
The ashram did agree?
Yeah.
Wow.
That it's really not that way at all. That what everybody thinks. But they said it's like too late. It's all out there. And they stood by the fact that Ramana is still available to clarify. And when you get to that point, just go right to Ramana and he'll tell you himself. And they don't need to retranslate
to go to Ramana, that's an interesting concept. Where is Ramana?
Well, lots of people say Jesus lives.
Yeah, but
and a lot of people say that all the saints are still available.
Yeah.
No.
And some...
Maybe that's their testimony, I don't know. I mean, to me, I don't want to go there. I'd rather go to you or to anyone, Mm-hmm. I'd just rather go to my fellow live man.
Yeah.
But I mean, maybe I suppose if I was on a desert island and praying to Jesus or Ramana, maybe I would get an answer, or Nisargadatta.
Yeah, but would the answer come from Ramana or would it come from you?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't need to do that, you see, because like how many people channel and they say, well, I talked to Gabriel, or I talked to, Benjamin, or I talked to whoever. They got a name, right?
Yeah.
And then I don't even see, well, why do we need a name? Okay, for them, they need a name because they're so realized that whatever they're saying, whatever their lips are forming the words, they're not from them because they come from no space.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow there's a name attached to that. That's the excuse I'm making for those guys.
Sure, no.
I mean, and for me, they could just say, no, it's just a direct transmission, or without a name, or let it be from them, or let it just be from neutral. Let's call it the knowing field.
Sure.
Just coming from universal knowledge or something like that.
Sure.
Or you can put a name on it.
Yeah. As far as the name thing, I don't know if I buy into that. I think that's our own mind puts a name on it or label it. Maybe it's deeply unconscious.
Maybe it's just a comfort level.
Yeah, sure.
That Daddy could tell us.
Sure, absolutely. Because if, Ramana is that. Ramana is the absolute. The drop has merged into the ocean. There is no more drop, that which we are in that absolute aspect. That's where Ramana is. That's where Nisargadatta is. Their individuality is gone. We were talking about Ram Krishna, so might as well continue on that. But they say Ram Krishna attained final enlightenment. He used to have visions of Kali. He was very devoted to Kali. And he went to this wise yogi and he said, I'm still not fully enlightened. What should I do? Should I keep praying to Kali? The yogi told me, he's like, next time you see Kali, cut Kali in half with a sword. Ramakrishna was terrified. He's like, where am I going to get the sword from? And the yogi said, same place you got Kali from. And then that was his kind of moment of realization. So it's a very nice story. It's a beautiful story.
See, I was actually trying to say, do we need tradition? But with a story like that, that's a beauty.
So even the teachings of Ramana, when you get to that level, you'll talk to Ramana, be Ramana. Ramana is you. Find Ramana in you. The answers come from the silence. Abide as the self, as Ramana used to say. And the answers will come from that space. You don't need any duality or any kind of a subject-object relationships. The answers will come from that space.
So they come in no language.
Yes. When you abide...
And they come in language, but they really come in, they're not limited by any language,
sure.
Right?
And it comes from direct experience. Ramana's practice was self-inquiry, but also abide as the self. Constantly, consciously abide as the self, as the absolute aspect of oneself. When you abide as the self, your identity is in that. So it's an inversion. You're seeing the world from the absolute perspective. It becomes obvious. Instead of trying to figure out everything from the relative perspective, move into the silence and sit in the silence. And your whole world will change. It's obvious. It's not even about thinking about it. It's right in front of you.
For a while we say abide in the self, and it seems impossible, and it seems like such an effort, and it seems like such a discipline, and it seems like such a lifetime work. And, and I think that, when abide in the self is actually impossible not to do.
Right.
And especially for Ramana, it would be, what is he saying? Because, he never would have a possibility to not abide in the self, because that's just all there is.
Sure. Yeah. And that's you're absolutely right. You're in the self right now. I am. Every living thing, every unliving thing, everything, period, is in the self. There is that, initially, I think, after awakening, there's that contrast between the, I got it, I lost it, I got it, I lost it, I got it, I lost it,
Muse about that, just wonder about that and out loud and just say, what could that be? What could the mechanism of that be, and how could that be happening?
I think the relative aspect, the me, John, sees the absolute, and there's some attachment there. Oh, that was so wonderful. That's where I want to be. So you abide as the self. Relative comes. So I think your mind creates this whole thing, but in time, you start to see that you can never not be that. You can never not be yourself.
So is getting lost just the worry that, I got to go there, and then and the strategies that you have to stay there, is that just the lost part? The moment you have a strategy?
The getting lost part on the absolute level can't happen. On the relative level, it can, though. And I've gotten lost. I feel like I've awoken a dozen times and fallen back asleep. In Vedanta, like classical Vedanta, they talk about vasanas. They talk about even after self-realization, one's tendencies can still pull one out. You can still forget who you are in truth based on your tendencies, deeply rooted tendencies. If you're really identified with being a father, a mother, a plumber, whatever, you know, that identification will pull you from truth. I mean,
probably a plumber's not that bad, but I mean,
yeah, right.
But I mean, probably a fearful person is a tendency, like an inadequate person or a person that needs to work extra hard because they've felt that they've been on the short end of the stick or something like that, or not really getting their share, or come from a tough background, or came from some place that didn't have equity. And then somehow there's a compensation going on. That's a tendency.
Absolutely.
More than just having a title or a role.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's a good point. And that will pull you out too. If there's disease in your relative self, you will constantly lose yourself. That's what, you know, self-inquiry. A lot of times people will be in a very vulnerable situation and they're doing self-inquiry. It's not working. And the analogy, a good analogy is kind of like you can't see the bottom of the water if there's too many waves on the surface. You know, you need, you know, on the relative aspect, there needs to be, I think, a certain amount of healing, a certain amount of clarity for that recognition to happen, to live in that.
So clarity is just, in healing is just ease. So somehow you have to go easy.
Yeah, and just fully accept and embrace.
And then somehow what? What's the value of being easy? I mean, I guess there's a couple of theories. One is to get tighter and tighter and then finally pop. That seems to be very damaging or distressed.
Tighter and tighter?
Yeah, stress, you know, like seeking harder and harder. And then, you know, more depressed, or somehow
until finally everything
finally you drop the whole mess.
Oh, man.
And there's a lot of stories like that, right?
Sure. And I think we've probably both experienced that to some degree. Yeah. And it does. It's almost like it becomes so heavy, so overwhelming that there is the great relief, right? The relief.
Yeah, that's the one way to do it, you know. But then maybe there's another way that would be with joy. The dancing, singing, loving way. Yeah. The bhakti way, maybe.
Yeah, that's never worked for me, but it has for a lot of people, you know. Adyashanti, I heard him say one time, he said, if you're enjoying your process, you're not doing it right.
Well, he's on the tough part. He's on the tough trail, see, because he meditated for 15 years and finally he just gave up because it wasn't working, right? So he freaked out. So that's his way.
But it depends. I think it depends on one's personality, one's experiences in the past. You know, maybe there's some kind of unconscious feeling that we're not worthy of this. So there's some kind of unconscious mechanism that needs to create this whole facade and put oneself through the ringer. I don't know, you know. I know the Course in Miracles talks about it, that the reason we're separated is because of guilt. We feel guilt and shame. We're not worthy of the truth. And I never understood what that meant until, you know, quite recently, kind of like, maybe there is that aspect of it too. I don't know. So.
In any case, none of that stuff's personal. It's just all kind of in the culture, in the family, in the parenting, in the grandparenting.
Sure.
I mean, it's just our heritage. And I suppose, you know, sometime I was talking with somebody, I don't remember even who, and they were saying, like, if you could solve some of these quandaries that you have, you know, these feelings of not being able or ready, or, you know, not being free, that all your dead relatives would be dancing in the street, you know, in that never land heaven, you know. They'd be up there, he did it, and they'd all be free from it.
Yeah.
I guess we were talking somehow family constellation, or we were talking about somehow, you know, that there is a oneness aspect to individuals, whether in the family or the culture or the village or the tribe or...
Yeah, like in cultures, tribes. That to me personally, that seems more like the relative oneness, though. It's a oneness through the movement of thought. It's the oneness through verbalization and concepts and identification.
Right, but we were talking about easing up. Sometimes you need to ease up,
Yeah.
right? And then where could you have to ease up? Only in the relative, right? In the
Yes.
absolute, you don't have to ease up.
Right, absolutely.
And then somehow that ease will allow you to open.
Sure. Yeah.
And let more things come in, or let more things come up.
Absolutely. Did you ever hear the analogy Ramana gave about like the movie screen and the projector? He said that the light behind the mechanism, what is that thing called, a projector?
Yeah.
That's the absolute. The light shines through the film, and this isn't, I don't know exactly, but I'm kind of estimating.
Yeah.
And there's a film. The light goes through the film, gets projected on the screen. The film is the relative.
Or the tendencies, right?
Yeah, the vasanas, the tendencies. If that film is very thick, it's going to be projected onto the world, and but if it's
and not much light is going to go through
right,
it.
if it's clear, light's going through, and it's obvious. The film is light, what it's being projected on is light, and this is light. So by easing up, by healing the relative, I think.
So that's lightening the film a little bit, a little bit of bleach.
Exactly. So that gave me a respect for the relative, because I had to backtrack, and I still do on many levels. I still have a lot of work to do on the relative. I've noticed, even coming back, which is kind of odd, but that sometimes just bringing it back and self-inquiry, there are some things that are pretty sticky sometimes.
Lately, I've been thinking of three things, or kind of three methodologies. Maybe we could tie it to some tradition and talk about jnani and somehow heart, and somehow we could maybe tie it to different things. But one thing I've been noticing is that it seems like stress and emotion come out of the story we believe in. They come from it, they're part of an interpretation. Stress and emotion, and maybe if there isn't an absolute, or if we want to talk about absolute, maybe absolute is very cool.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Very clear.
Yeah.
It's a cool, clear. Maybe a lot of people at first blush might not like that. They want the heat, the fire, the heat. The heat of conflict, the heat of...
Right. Yeah, only because we're so conditioned to it. We don't know any better. Yeah, it's almost like an addiction. We're addicted to the heat, to the conflict. I know a lot of Neo-Advaita teachers, or any kind of non-dual tradition. They'll say you don't need to do anything, right? Did you ever hear that? The student, "Oh, master, what do I do?" You don't need to do anything. But that's very literal. Don't do anything. Don't even think. Don't do anything. Just be the nothing.
Yeah, do everything. Don't stop. Don't come out with any no. Don't stop dancing.
We're fools whether we dance or not, right? I think that's a Japanese
then deconstructing
problem.
that story, in a way, it's intellectual, because you have to kind of intuit what the story is.
Mm-hmm.
But you practice making other stories and see what the effect of them are.
Absolutely. Practice making a story of being a spiritual seeker, or
well, that. But I mean, you make alternative points of view of different apparent happenings, different events. You have a different point of view, and you notice that there's a whole different psychological makeup that goes with it. There's a whole different mood.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole different energy level. So then all those things, energy is not real.
No.
It just somehow comes out of a story.
Yeah, that's part of the relative.
I mean, if you're doing an exciting project, you're full of energy and you're full of enthusiasm. So those energies and enthusiasms are not really real. They're just a product of something you tell yourself, and the conviction you have about that. So disconstructing the story in a way, not just piece by piece, but in a way somehow losing faith in it.
Yeah.
And it becomes more transparent, the story, and then all these driving vasanas or the guts behind the vasanas is the emotion,
Yes.
emotional content.
Yes.
Because if it's just a plain story that doesn't relate, it's not very controlling.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really do anything to you.
Yeah,
So that's one. So another thing is like something comes up. Something is always coming up. Something is here now. Meet it. And that has a lot to do with acceptance. Somehow you have to accept it and invite it in, and not say, "Oh no, not you again. What am I going to do about that? I'm on this, I'm doing a diet. Okay, so then I'll get back to my diet, or whatever. Somehow just inviting something in and meeting it, whatever's happening in this moment, in every moment.
Yeah.
So then that's when people start talking about the body and the feelings in the body and being embodied enlightenment, they call it, because you're meeting everything.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is being met.
Yeah. And fully accepting and embracing.
And you notice the tendency not to accept and not to embrace.
Yeah.
And to exclude. And mostly it's in you, but it reflects also in the world. You're excluding the world too.
Yeah, it's an interesting tendency.
And then another way might just be abiding in the self, and abiding in just in peace and awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.
That could be another kind
and
of...
And it seems like that might be the quickest, but the slope might also be the steepest. The degree, it might be the quickest, but the highest degree of difficulty, and then so on and so forth with the three that you mentioned.
Right.
Because it's right there, it's immediate, and if you could really just sit there and stay there, gosh, in no time, But you can't just sit there and stay there.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody that climbs mountains likes to go straight up the side. They like to go up the path. You like to go up the trail, right? I mean, it kills you to go straight up the side.
Yeah. No, that is very rare. It's very rare, very difficult.
It's not even a possibility. I mean, it's not even an option, really, just to start walking up. Just walk up, I'll be in the top in a jiffy.
I think that's what Ramana did, though, when he went in the cave for 17 years. He was just...
17 years is not a jiffy.
In a cave, right. Yeah, so... No, but I agree. Yeah, that's the three that you mentioned, and, the quickness, degree of difficulty, they vary. But that's the most direct way, Be consciousness now.
Somehow, I don't think that was a 17-year discipline. I think he just loved it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful. Absolutely, the dissolution that happens. It's very
not dissolution or no dissolution. I mean, I don't even know if that was a part of it. I mean, we can say dissolution, but probably that was not the key. The key was just the homeness part of it.
Mm-hmm. And why did he do it? This is, he awoke. There's the story of him on the bedroom floor having a death experience. That was his awakening. Why to go in the cave after awakening? There was still something that needed to be done there, though. That's the way I view it.
That's what we say, see? And that's where the translations got screwed up,
Right.
And then anyhow, he did it because he did it, that's all. Yeah. And then he wanted to.
Sure.
Not because somebody said, hey, you got to do this, and you got to do it for 17 years, so take an oath and sign it in blood.
Right.
No, he just went in there because he went in there, that's all. And that was the highest and best thing he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. That's what I would put on it, Mm-hmm. But anyone else that says, no, he's highly disciplined, more disciplined than you and me, he's a god. So, he knew what it takes. He did what it takes. All that kind of stuff. It's really a lot of Western crap.
Yeah. And maybe, the way I look at it is that whole process was that kind of shift of identity. There was an awakening, a conscious recognition, But then there was the shift from the relative into, it's almost like a shift in identity. I know words it's hard to find the right words, but it's to shift into that. And that was the process to burn off all the remaining vasanas, to all the self-identifications.
All that, when people tell those stories and when people recite those traditions and that lore, Vedanta lore, it all sounds so volitional. You know, it sounds like this guy really had a great will, and I don't really believe that, anymore. I just don't know if there's any volition whatsoever to it.
Yeah, and who knows? I think the mind sometimes wants, and I think maybe traditions have done us a disservice where we think of enlightenment as this great
achievement,
unattainable achievement. Yes, so maybe we create these stories to make it appear so, and touching the guru's feet and throwing flowers, but it's so ordinary, so simple, and I think that messes people up when they see that. It's like,
So enlightenment is actually the greatest non-achievement that you can possibly
absolutely
not do.
Beautiful. Yes.
So then, if we say, what is enlightenment? We just say, enlightenment is this.
Everything. Yeah.
It's not everything. It's just this. Everything is a concept. That was kind of fun. It was kind of like this was a magic word, There should have been magic dust when I said that. That was a hoot.
What can we even talk about after that, Rich? You ruined the whole...
Maybe we could shift gears. Many people say enlightenment is so ordinary, and then because it is just this. Mm-hmm. And then anybody that reads a story and says, well, there's bliss, or there's this, or there's that, or there's clarity, or there's love, or there's... Already they're walking away from this. And they want to give it some tendencies, and give it some class, and give it some character, and give it some authenticity from past testimony.
Yeah, because that's what the mind does, right?
We don't know. That's what the mind is doing at this moment when I'm doing that. But then, when I'm not doing it, then that's not what the mind does.
Yeah. It's very counterintuitive. It's so simple and ordinary, but it's also very counterintuitive and radical in that the mind functions through concepts and through solving, manipulating, seeking. This is polar opposite. This is on the other side of the continuum, you could say, and that's... But you could see how people wouldn't ever recognize it.
Well, they haven't. So many haven't.
Yeah, and I think, gosh, I would think the vast majority have had this. Everybody, yeah. It's just that conscious recognition hasn't happened. And that's the key.
Somehow, I don't know, there's some hypnotism that says, I want your this, I don't want my this. As if there could be different thises.
Yeah.
And, I guess we should have to acknowledge there's differences. You live in an apartment, I live in a house, you live in this town, I live in that town. You know, we live in this country, someone lives in a developing world. Somebody else is bugging us by making too much national debt. And somewhere else they're bugging them by destroying all the food sources. I mean, this.
But even all that, where's the problem in there? You know, it's still all within the realm of verbalization and.
Well, not necessarily. If there's no food, it's in the realm of your belly.
Yeah.
Or if,
it's still.
You know, okay, now gas is $4.50 or something a gallon, but maybe it'll be $40.
Yeah. Still in the realm of the relative, though, I guess is what I was referring to.
Somehow the relative is. How does the relative show up in this? I mean, it's here all over, right? Just it's here the moment you look at it.
Can you repeat that?
The relative.
Uh-huh.
It's here the moment you look at it, so it's not really disappearing anywhere. It's contained in this.
It is, yeah.
Lately I've been thinking about metaphors. You know, because maybe all of language is a metaphor anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been thinking about emotional metaphors, and that I was saying things like contentment is a metaphor for wholeness, and stress or anxiety is a metaphor for neediness. So stress is caused by believing that I'm incomplete, that I need something.
Yeah.
And I don't say that you could just, you know, wave a magic wand and then you're not incomplete, and that
Sure.
that you still don't have to have a job and stuff, you know. But
Yeah.
you have two arms and the brain that got that job and it's able to complete it.
Yeah. And that's the process, is integrating that knowledge. You know, bringing it back and again and again and over again. Seeing that it's, what do they say? That happiness is not getting what you want, it's not wanting. You know, it's we project our happiness, our contentment, our satisfaction to things outside. You know, when I get that new job, then I'll be happy. Then this is kind of a Vedanta way of looking at it. So you get that new job, right? And you're delighted. But you're only delighted because you don't have any desires at that moment in time. Because you dropped everything, because how you were talking about, you're at ease. So when you get your desires, there is a letting go. There is that ease. And you kind of fall into this. So we constantly project thinking it's out there, but it's all in here. You know, where else could it be? You know, the car didn't change anything, my physiology or anything like that. It's just that we finally let go and we gave up. I got it. And then you can sit there until the mind makes up anew.
We were talking the other day about, you know, because so often we talk about unconditional happiness.
Yeah.
No, unconditional love, right? And so we said, what about unconditional happiness?
Oh, man.
Let's have unconditional happiness. Because anytime there's a condition on happiness, then there's always a postponement. And it never really comes.
Yeah.
So then if you really want happiness, then you have to have unconditional happiness. So then, I mean, that means like, let's launch. We have to start right now.
Yeah.
No conditions.
Mm.
And that's kind of like my metaphor, because my metaphor of contentment, that we can just go to unconditional happiness.
Yeah. Be unconditional happiness.
Yeah. So people will say, well, where is unconditional happiness and how do you get it? Well, that's the first condition. Right?
Good one.
It's not that hard.
No. As long as you don't think about it.
Well, I suppose if it's hard, you can always turn on Never Not Here. You know?
As long as you don't think about it.
Good times, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks a lot for coming around.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Komperda.
Compared to what, right?
Compared to what? Compared to John. And thank you, too. Thank you for coming around.
Thank you.